Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to this year's NSF and NSB Awards celebration. And thank you for being a little bit patient with us as we work through a few technical issues. Once a year, the National Science Foundation and Board brings together top leaders in government, industry, and science to honor dedicated and remarkable people and their extraordinary contributions to our country. In a normal year, this event would have been held as a special black tie gala in Washington, D.C. back in May. However, in order to safely navigate the pandemic, today we're honoring this year's winners from remote locations around the country. While we regret the limitations that distancing has imposed, a virtual event may allow for one of our biggest awards celebration audiences ever, that we hope includes many loved ones and colleagues of our awardees. Today, we celebrate new knowledge and discovery across diverse science and engineering disciplines, the next generation of scientific talent, and the understanding that benefits accrue to all of us from advancements in science and technology. With the presentation of NSB's Vannever Bush Award, we will recognize an individual for his extraordinary leadership, public service, and contributions to our nation through activities in science and technology. With the NSB Public Service Award, we honor two people who have contributed to public understanding of science and engineering in the United States. With the presentation of NSF's Alan T. Waterman Awards, we will honor two younger scientists who have demonstrated exceptional achievement and show outstanding promise for significant future achievements through their research. We'll celebrate the recipients of these awards with two videos that highlight their achievements. The first video will showcase the winners of the National Science Board Awards. I'd like to offer a special note of thanks to Victor McCrary, the vice chair of our board, who was chair of the 2020 NSB Honorary Awards Subcommittee, for leading our board in the selection of these winners. The second video will be about NSF's Alan T. Waterman Award winners. And then the videos will be followed by a special panel discussion moderated by NSB alumnus Vint Cerf with these amazing leaders on the future of science and discovery. The Vannevar Bush Award honors lifelong leaders who have made exceptional contributions to the welfare of humankind and the nation through public service activities in science, technology, and public policy. The National Science Board established this award in 1980 in memory of Vannevar Bush, who served as science advisor to the President Franklin Roosevelt during World War II, helped establish federal funding for science and engineering as a national priority during peacetime, and was behind the creation of the National Science Foundation. This year's winner, Roderick Pettigrew, has worked tirelessly throughout his career to break down the boundaries between those working in the physical sciences and engineering and those working in medicine, reimagining healthcare solutions and helping to narrow gaps between the two disciplines in a way that has benefited all of science and society. The National Science Board Public Service Award honors individuals and groups that have made substantial contributions to increase public understanding of science and engineering in the United States. This is increasingly essential as scientific and technological advances permeate our daily lives. And this year we have two awardees. Maya Ojmira is a social entrepreneur who's working to inspire generations of young people to be science and technology leaders and innovators through the Society for Science in the Public, its science competitions, and its flagship magazine, Science News. Richard Ladner is a computer scientist who has worked for decades to ensure that those with disabilities can participate fully in STEM careers, and that disability is included as another facet of diversity. Before our video begins, I'd like to remind everyone that these special showcase videos will be available on the NSB and NSF YouTube channels and websites. Also, please note that there may be a slight video to audio delay tonight due to our presentation being live via teleconference mode. And now to our video.
When I have a student who has a disability, I don't think of them any differently than any other student. I might have to use sign language, and my behavior will change somewhat, but in terms of their abilities to do science and engineering, I feel they can do it just as well as anybody else. Both my parents were deaf, and they both taught at the California School for the Deaf in Berkeley, where I grew up. Over time, I saw my parents' lives change because of technology. When captions got on television, boy, did that make a difference for my parents. I got my PhD in mathematics. That led me to do theoretical computer science. I kind of took that all in and started to realize that I'd learned enough that I could actually contribute to technology for people with disabilities. Around the mid-1980s, I got involved with the deafblind community here in Seattle, and I could see a real need for technology there. There's a lot of young people who have disabilities who could use support. They need support. They need to be able to get into science and engineering. I've taken the last part of my career and decided to make that happen. Disability, it's not rare. It's about 1/7 of the world's population. There are these greats of science and nobody talks about their disability. Not very many people know that Thomas Edison was deaf. Isaac Newton was epileptic his entire life. Albert Einstein was dyslexic. I think of disability as just a facet of diversity, and having people with diverse perspectives helps science and engineering get better. Diverse groups working on technology get better results. I recognize that an attitudinal change is needed, that disability should be thought of as part of diversity. And that's the way I've been working for the last 15 years in sort of that spirit. I've decided to have workshops for people with disabilities. Access CS for All is a relatively new project, and through that work, we're continuing the development of accessible technologies for youth doing computer sciences. Access Computing, it's an alliance, and we have about 62 partners currently. Most of them are other academic institutions, but we also have industry partners, and we've supported over the last 15 years almost 1,000 students. In the last 5 years, we've had 15 who have finished their PhDs. We just have to make sure that science is accessible and that it's welcoming to everyone.
If we are to solve the world's most intractable problems, the only way we're going to be able to do that is with science, with engineering. I'm the daughter of Indian immigrants. My parents came here from India, and my father received his PhD in electrical engineering at the University of Iowa. My mother, an entrepreneur. Science became part of our lives at a very early age. I started doing science fair projects when I was in middle school. My first science fair project was the study of duckweeds, and I became a science fair junkie. I ended up receiving a fellowship that allowed me to travel from Thailand to Pakistan for a year. And it was in India, where my parents are from, is where I say I had my moment of obligation. I was on a train platform in Bhubaneswar. I saw 50 kids sitting in a circle learning how to read and write. And these kids were obviously poor and destitute. And I thought at that moment, I had that moment of obligation of how do I help? And how come I don't see more train platform schools all over India? I decided to found the Global Fund for Children. And that organization is really about investing small amounts of capital into really innovative grassroots organizations that are undervalued and undercapitalized. The Society for Science and the Public is best known for three things: for our award-winning magazine, Science News, our world-class research competitions, as well as a suite of outreach and equity programs that reach young people throughout the United States. My work has been centered around opportunity. It's been centered around making sure that young people can reach their dreams. I'm inspired by seeing young people say, I can do this, or that I can actually solve a problem that's occurring in my backyard. So this community that the Society for Science and the Public is building, whether it's our readership with Science News, whether it's our alumni base of our competitions, whether it's all the young people and teachers we're reaching through our outreach and equity programs, we are building a movement to make sure that science is front and center in everyone's lives.
I think I came out of the womb as a scientist. I've always been fascinated by the how and why of things. My parents indeed were my first role models. The energy that they would have generated knowing that their son was the 2020 Vannever Bush Awardee could only be measured in gigawatts. My first career early on in the early to mid 80s was in working to develop MRI techniques applied to imaging the cardiovascular system. I was fortunate to come along at a time where this technology was just emerging. And I was able to participate in its development. That technology has now evolved to be very commonplace and seen across the world. I was privileged to have been recruited to be the inaugural director of the National Institute of Biomedical Imaging and Bioengineering, commonly known as NIBIB. We challenge the community to pursue and achieve medical moonshots for the purpose of really solving big problems that affect a lot of people. My current career is as the CEO of InHealth and Executive Dean of InMed at Texas A&M University in collaboration with Houston Methodist Hospital. InMed is the first initiative within the broader InHealth umbrella. InMed specifically is the convergence, the blending of engineering and medicine in the same curriculum to train a new kind of healthcare professional, one who understands both engineering and medicine in an integrated fashion. And we call them physicianeers because indeed they are solving problems in health through engineering. To anchor this aspiration, we require our graduates to actually invent a solution to a healthcare problem by graduation. I don't think that there is any way that we will get to where we would like to be without having the kind of technological innovation that these physicianeers will bring to the whole healthcare ecosystem. At each phase of my career, the driving motivation for pursuing the convergence of the life sciences, the physical sciences, and engineering is that this is the most efficient path to solving some of our major problems. In nature, all of the scientific disciplines and engineering are seamlessly interwoven. Without all of these integrated in a symbiotic fashion, there would be no life. So it follows that our best solutions to our healthcare challenges are most likely to come from an approach that's similarly integrated.
Wow, well, that was just wonderful to see. And I hope everyone will just join me now in a moment of well-deserved applause for these outstanding individuals. I'd now like to welcome the NSF Director, Sethuraman Panchanathan, to present this year's Alan T. Waterman Awards. Panch?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is my great pleasure to recognize the winners of this year's Alan T. Waterman Award. This prestigious award was established by Congress in 1975 to mark the National Science Foundation's 25th anniversary and to honor the agency's first and longest serving director, Alan Tower Waterman. During Waterman's 12 years as NSF director, he championed the importance of support for basic research and fought hard to carve out a space for NSF within the federal landscape. He made key decisions along the way that helped build the thriving agency we all know today. Chief among them, he insisted that NSF's core mission must always be to support discoverers who are forging new paths at the frontiers of science and engineering. And indeed, the Waterman Award speaks directly to that core mission, which holds firm today. That's why every year we award the highest honor the National Science Foundation bestows on early career scientists and engineers in his name. The Waterman Award recognizes an outstanding researcher, 40 years of age and younger, or not more than 10 years beyond receiving their PhD. Awardees receive a grant of $1 million over 5 years for scientific research or advanced study in any field of science or engineering. The Waterman Award Committee, an external panel of distinguished scientists and engineers, carefully selects winners from a pool of nominations. The committee has reported that this year's winners were chosen from a large group of extremely qualified early career nominees representing all disciplines. I have no doubt that the selection process must have been difficult. I would like to recognize the Waterman Award Committee members for their hard work. Thank you for your service. And special thanks to the chair of the 2020 committee, Barbara Landau. We are fortunate to have two honorees this year. They are both innovators who are creatively addressing some of the most challenging scientific questions. And as you will hear shortly, they both possess a deep commitment to mentorship and diversity in science. It's a distinct honor to recognize Professor Emily Balskas, Professor of Chemistry and Chemical Biology at Harvard University, and Professor John Dabiri, Centennial Professor of Aeronautics and Mechanical Engineering at the California Institute of Technology, our 2020 Alan T. Waterman Awardees. Emily Balskas has opened up novel ways to explore and exploit the chemistry and biology of microbes that live in our bodies and how they are linked to our health. Professor Dabiri has looked to the fluid mechanics of sea life for inspiration to build things like better wind farms that appear to boost efficiency with a much smaller footprint. These scientific pioneers are truly forging new paths at the frontiers of science and engineering, and we are already seeing the potential impacts of their work. Many of you may be aware of the fact that 2020 marks NSF's 70th anniversary. I believe it is fitting that as this milestone year draws to a close, we are able to reflect this evening on the agency's legacy and celebrate the bright future that lies ahead. An exciting and promising future for science and our world, which this year's winners embody in the fullest sense. Congratulations, Dr. Balskas and John Dabiri. I look forward to following your research. As I end my remarks, I would like to recognize Sherry Green, who is retiring from NSF at the end of the month, but who has been a significant contributor to the Waterman Award program. She arrived at NSF 32 years ago after completing an internship at the USDA and started in the Division of Behavioral and Neurosciences before moving to the Office of Science and Technology Infrastructure, now OIA, the Office of Integrative Activities, to administer the Academic Research Infrastructure Program. In OIA, she has handled many programs and special projects over the years, including being the first coordinator of the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship Program, and since 2015, working with the Office of Science Technology Policy to coordinate the National Medal of Science and PKS programs and to manage the Waterman Award program. She will be remembered by many who were minority undergraduates for creating and running the Summer Scholars Internship Program, being program officer and mentor to cohorts of summer scholar interns, many of whom went on to pursue research careers as a result. Sherry, thank you for all that you have done for NSF. Once again, congratulations to Dr. Balskas and Dr. Dabiri. Thank you.
I think my first and potentially most important role models are my parents. They taught English and history, and education was just always a huge part of my life growing up. I actually went to an all-women's high school, and so all of my science teachers were women, and I think that was really crucial for building my confidence. I really fell in love with chemistry as a high school student. I found manipulating molecules in a lab to be lots of fun and to be an outlet for creativity in terms of thinking about how to build molecular architectures in beautiful ways. But as I was learning how to do this, I really became curious about how nature made molecules. So I came to appreciate that microbes are perhaps our most talented chemists. I work at the interface of chemistry and biology, and the unifying theme of my lab's research is studying microorganisms and specifically microbial chemistry. Microbes live together in complex communities called microbiomes, and we actually don't understand a lot about how those complex communities work. But we know there's a lot of chemistry going on, especially in the case of one of our favorite communities, the human gut microbiome. There's evidence that that chemistry can impact human health and disease. So we're basically trying to unlock the chemical mysteries of human microbiome and trying to figure out how it impacts human biology. One of the main things we do in my lab is try to link microbial genes with chemistry, with molecules and metabolic activities. We can now look at human microbiome sequencing data, and we can more accurately predict which functions, which chemistry might be present in individual patient microbiomes. And the larger goal of our research is hopefully someday to be able to leverage that very detailed chemical information to guide the development of new therapeutics. So maybe drugging the microbiome with small molecules, maybe by understanding how microbial chemistry contributes to human disease, we might open up new opportunities for drug development and discovery. As a recipient of the Waterman Award, I hope to use the $1 million grant to allow my lab to pursue our most creative, most out-of-the-box, most potentially transformative ideas. By far, my proudest professional accomplishment is mentoring and training the members of my lab. So I hope that in 10 years, my research lab continues to be producing science that is breaking new grounds, and I hope that by that point, our work on the gut microbiome will be starting to have an impact in medicine and drug discovery.
My most important role models growing up were first and foremost my parents. They both emigrated to the United States from Nigeria and wanted a better life for us, so they picked Toledo, Ohio as the sort of all-American city. And it was there that I grew up, and watching my dad as an engineer was really where I gained my passion for science and engineering. My professors in college, they were the ones who introduced me to the idea of even being a professor. I went to college thinking I would go back to the Midwest and work for an auto company. That was basically what people in that area did. And then I discovered Caltech, which has been an oasis of science. It's really been science heaven in many respects. All of our research is really focused on understanding this idea of fluid dynamics in nature. So a simple animal like a jellyfish can tell us a lot about really complicated processes like propulsion. We've been able to study the flow that a jellyfish makes in the ocean and help to inform the idea of better diagnoses of heart disease because of the analogies we can draw between those currents in the ocean and the blood flow in your heart. Again, all connected to fluid dynamics, which describes the physics of both of those systems. The animals have taught us a lot about how we can develop more effective technologies. Technologies that have nothing to do with the ocean, like wind farms, taking a cue from how fish school in the ocean and being able to use those ideas to develop more effective wind energy systems that take up less land. One of the challenges we face in wind farms today is that each of the wind turbines generates a lot of choppy air. And so that choppy air would reduce the performance of the neighboring wind turbines if we don't spread them far apart. But when you look at a school of fish, you'll notice they're not spreading out as far apart as possible. They're actually coordinating their positions so that they can take advantage of that choppy water that's created by their neighbors. The spark came to us that perhaps we could take that strategy. Instead of spreading the wind turbines as far apart as possible, maybe we could arrange them in particular ways so that they could take advantage of the air currents generated by their neighbors. If you use that technology, along with this fish schooling approach, you can get up to 10 times more energy out of a plot of land than the conventional systems. The $1 million grant that comes with the Waterman Award is sort of mind-boggling at first. It enables us to be able to pursue some of our most ambitious ideas. But what we also are aware of is that those systems that are our source of inspiration are in serious threat from climate change. And so what we would like to use this grant to do is to better understand those threats in the ocean and to better help develop strategies to mitigate those threats. In the next 10 years, I believe the human factor in science is going to become much more important. And specifically, I'm referring to the woeful lack of diversity we have in science. I'm the only black professor in engineering at Caltech. It's something that you wouldn't think would be possible in the year 2020. My proudest professional accomplishment would be the students who I've had the opportunity to mentor in my lab. To date, we've had 16 PhD students through my lab, 11 of whom have been women. So I've been really fortunate to be able to help diversify academia. And so my hope in the next 10 years is that more people like myself have the opportunity to experience science at its highest levels at a place like Caltech. As a concrete marker, it's also the case that we've never had a Black Nobel Prize winner in a scientific field. And so my hope is that by 2030, I can tell you that she's on our campus here at Caltech developing her research.
Wow, another inspiring video. So again, I'll ask you to please join me in applauding these amazing scientists. So now it's my great pleasure to introduce Vint Cerf, who will be leading the panel discussion. He'll be asking some questions, and then we'll open up to National Science Board members for their questions at the end as time allows. We're lucky to call Vint a colleague, as he is a former member of the National Science Board. He's currently Vice President and Chief Internet Evangelist for Google. He's a co-designer of the architecture of the internet and holds a PhD in computer science from UCLA, as well as 29 honorary degrees. And Vint, as I turn it over to you, I'm going to note that we have apparently lost video again on Roderick Pettigrew, but we do believe we have him through audio. So that's how we'll proceed with the panel. So over to you, Vint.
Well, thank you so much, Ellen. And it's a real joy to reconnect with my colleagues at the National Science Board. Isn't it wonderful that NSF and the National Science Board have given us this opportunity to celebrate some wonderful and positive things about science and technology in the midst of this enormous pandemic. So Richard, Roderick, Maya, John, and Emily, I will raise a glass to you for giving us this opportunity and excuse to celebrate and to look forward to everything that you are going to do in the future. I do have some questions for you, however, and I'd like to start with Richard. You've argued that conversations about diversity should always include disabilities. What do you think most people get wrong when they think about those disabilities? Why has it been so hard to make computer applications accessible?
Wow. Thank you, Vin, for those tough questions. First of all, about disability itself, I think a lot of people, when they think about disability, they think, oh, what a tragedy, that's terrible. How could that happen? Especially if somebody is newly disabled or, baby is born with a disability or something like that. But I've known people with disabilities my whole life, like my parents. And for the most part, people with disabilities are perfectly happy. That's part of their identity is disability. And they also have many challenges that other people don't have. And so their life experiences, bring a kind of diversity to science that would not happen. I think, there's been, we mentioned in the video, some of the people with disabilities who have done a lot, like Stephen Hawking, and even yourself, Vint, you're hearing impaired. And so I think we should recognize that disability is part of the diversity, and it is something that we should cherish. And 1 billion people in the world have a disability, so it's not a small number, and so we should be tapping them for doing the scientific and engineering research that needs to be done in the future. Also, you mentioned why it's so hard to make things accessible. In fact, I know you wrote an article about this in the communications at the ACM several years ago, which I read. I probably should have reread it, but you only gave me that question yesterday. So actually, in some sense, it's really well documented how to make applications accessible, websites accessible. The big companies that produce these operating systems like Microsoft and Google and Apple, they all have accessibility frameworks. So if an engineer knows about that framework, they can make their product accessible. But unfortunately, most people don't know about these accessibility frameworks. So I'm not saying that it's easy to make something accessible. Most of engineering is fairly difficult. And so, but you have to learn this. And unfortunately, our universities and colleges don't teach accessibility very much. A couple of years ago, we did a survey of 1,400 computer science and information science faculty members around the nation. And we found that only 3% teach anything about disability. Well, that's a very small number. So, one of our goals in my project, Access Computing, there's another project called Teach Access that's actually founded by industry. And both of us are working to try and change that to make sure that accessibility, technology about accessibility is actually taught at universities and colleges. So I guess the answer to your second question is that it is difficult. It can be learned, it's not a mystery, and it can be done just for, but there are these gaps in our education system.
So there's a famous expression from one of my old bosses who said, to do the impossible, first you have to believe it isn't. And I think that's exactly the message. It isn't impossible, and you've shown that in your own career. Roderick, I hope you're still with us. Can I confirm that we have you on audio?
You do have me on audio.
Wonderful.
I just have to speak through my picture.
Yeah. Well, so you've said that you'd like to train a new type of science professional by blending health, medicine, and physical sciences, so the revolutionary thinking for all of those fields happen in the same brain. Can you explain for us a little more why you believe this is preferable to having a team of people, each bringing their own different skills to collectively tackle a problem?
Well, first of all, that is an accurate characterization of my statement and my beliefs. And the answer is pretty straightforward. It's efficiency and effectiveness. Indeed, the kind of person that we plan to train represents a new mind, a new mindset, a new way of thinking, different from the traditional medical mind, different from a physician who subsequently learns engineering, different from the engineer who subsequently learns medicine. It's a new kind of brain that we really don't have right now, not in any substantial degree. We don't have individuals who have been trained this way, who have a blended understanding of the physical sciences and the life sciences. I was rather intrigued by John's video. He seems to be headed down that path with his study of currents in the ocean and the correlation between those and the development of the cardiovascular system is an indicator of how sciences, physical and biological, are so interwoven in nature. So if we're going to solve big problems, challenging problems, daunting problems, the solutions are most likely to come from individuals who have this collective, integrated, converged understanding. That could happen if you get multiple people around the table, but it's not as efficient as if you have it happening in the same brain. If you create a brain like this, I believe, you'll have more eureka moments. You'll dream about great ideas. They'll pop up at the least expected times, when you're taking a shower, when you're walking, maybe when you're cooking. You'll have these, wow, I got it sort of moments, because you have this complete, full, and thorough understanding of how health works and what goes wrong in disease. Now, in addition to that, there's another advantage. And the other advantage is you can still get multiple people around the table. And if those multiple people are trained like this, I would expect that you'd have an even greater explosion of ideas. It would be an exponential explosion. You have this situation that we often talk about where the whole is greater than the linear sum of the parts. That's something we all strive for in science, particularly in team science. In this situation, where you'd have a table of physicianeers, I would expect that the whole would be exponentially greater than the sum of the parts. So from this new mind with this composite blended understanding, we can imagine that people will be better equipped to not only recognize problems, these healthcare professionals, but also have bright ideas and imaginative and innovative approaches to solving these problems and challenges. And they will pop up here and there by intention and sometimes by happenstance when you least expect it, because the brain is now trained that way.
I love that answer, Roderick. What it tells me is that disciplines are an artifact, and we can do away with them, break down the walls, and generate a great many more ideas given the confluence of all the intelligence and learning in more than one discipline. That's a fabulous answer. Thank you for that.
And if I could just add to your last statement, indeed, because if you think about it, in nature, there are no silos. between these disciplines. They're seamlessly interwoven. And without that seamless blending of them, we wouldn't have nature.
Exactly right. I think your colleagues would, I'm sure, agree with that. So let's turn to Maya for a moment. Maya, your organization seeks to ensure that any young person with a passion for STEM has an opportunity to pursue that passion. So why do you think it's so important to foster STEM talent? And do you find that the participation in the programs like yours has a real impact on career trajectories?
Well, at the Society for Science and the Public, we're celebrating our 100th birthday next year. And we are one of the things we're best known for is our world-class science research competitions that include, in our day and age, the Westinghouse Science Talent Search, which is now the Regeneron Science Talent Search, the International Science and Engineering Fair, and Broadcom Masters, the premier middle school STEM competition. And, you know, my philosophy is that I believe that every young person in this country can become a scientist or engineer if that's what they want to be. And we have to make sure that we provide opportunities to every single young person in this country. And our competitions is a road to that, but so is our suite of outreach and equity programs that we've created, which builds on mentorship to mentor underserved kids. They're doing research, but they don't compete in competitions, to really build the capacity of high school teachers that are building research programs in their high schools. So we're doing that across the country. And we're also building science literacy across the country. I am publisher of Science News. Science News was founded 100 years ago. And one of the things we learned from science teachers across the country is that their textbooks are old. Science is changing by the day, and they don't know what to trust online. So we took Science News into the high schools. And we started with 250 high schools in 2014, and we're now in over 5,000 high schools with 20,000 STEM teachers teaching from Science News every 2 weeks with a teacher guide.
Fantastic.
We work at scale. I will go back to the talent piece of our competitions, and I have to call out the International Science and Engineering Fair was founded in 1950. Science Talent Search was founded in 1942. We have over 75,000 alumni. Some of those alumni have won Nobel Prizes, 13 of them have, MacArthur Fellowships. But I have to call out Dr. Pettigrew. Dr. Pettigrew competed in the International Science and Engineering Fair in 1967. So we are thrilled as an institution that we may have had just a tiny bit of influence on Dr. Pettigrew's trajectory. So, you know, if I can just replicate Dr. Pettigrew throughout the country and world of what I believe, have built over the last, I would say 80 years of these competitions, I just want more young people to know that they have these opportunities. And I think John said it beautifully, that we need to see a more diverse workforce in the science and engineering fields.
So, you know, here we go. I have a copy too, and I have a stack of them right here under my desk. Thank you so much, Maya. John, let's get to the heart of the question. What areas of science do you hope to bring greater attention to through the receipt of this award? I know you've got ideas. Would you share them with us?
Sure. Well, thanks, Vince. I really hope that this award highlights the importance of basic research writ large. And so, I mean, all of basic research, and not just those areas where we can imagine some immediate application. The reality is that today we can't really predict which areas of basic research are going to be critical to society in 5 years or 10 years. And so it's important that we continue to cast a wide net. This experience, the honor of winning the Waterman, it made me reflect on an experience we had in our lab maybe 7 or 8 years ago, We were developing a technique to use lasers to control those little shrimp you saw in the video, having them migrate in the lab in the same way that they do in the ocean. And after we published that work, we were all quite excited about this accomplishment, but we learned shortly thereafter, we were singled out by a US Senator in what's called a waste book as an example of a waste of taxpayers' money. And so you can imagine how crushing that was for the graduate student. She had been working on this for 3 years, and to have her work summarily dismissed, really even mocked, was really difficult. Now, it had a happy ending in the sense that if you fast forward a few years, that work was published in Nature. The technique itself turned out to be essential for developing research that we simply could not achieve doing ship-based research. And in fact, we saved taxpayers a lot of money. A ship to operate in the ocean is about $20,000 a day. She could operate her experiment for about the cost of a cup of coffee per day. So it reminded me, and it emphasizes this idea that we need to take a long view, not just us as scientists, but those who are managing and supporting science at the highest levels, remembering that, again, we need to cast a wide net in science. And so I hope this award, the fact that jellyfish of all things can be useful for things like renewable energy, that helps people realize that the future can evolve in many unexpected ways.
I have to tell you, John, I certainly hope that one of your students will come up with a closed form solution to Navier-Stokes. In the meantime, however, Punch, we need to hear that message and engage with our elected officials and make sure that they really have an appreciation for, even if not a deep understanding of, what our scientists and engineers are capable of achieving and why it's so valuable. I know I don't have to tell you that, but I'll pretend to be Picard and say, Punch, make it so. Now, Emily, can you tell us a little more about the importance of the microbiome in human health? What do we not know? That could be in many volumes, I suppose. And what's your next target?
Yeah, so the first thing to maybe emphasize is that we have known that microbes live in close association with humans for many, many years. What's changed over the last several decades has been advances in DNA sequencing technology that have allowed us to sequence DNA from the human microbiome and identify the types of microbes that are present in and on the human body. And so these types of experiments revealed that the human microbiome can be quite variable from person to person. And this variation can be strongly associated with health or disease. And so I think that has raised the idea that perhaps these organisms might be driving health and disease and have been an underappreciated factor in thinking about these issues. So now, we face this challenge of trying to figure out whether or not our microbiomes are playing causal roles in driving health and disease phenotypes. And we face a big obstacle in that we don't actually understand much about what the microbiome is actually doing. So in terms of the biological, the chemical functions that they're actually carrying out in the body, we have not characterized them to a great degree. And so this is really the knowledge gap that my research has been trying to address. We've been trying to take our knowledge of how nature does chemistry and understanding of how protein-based catalysts called enzymes work to try to mine microbiome sequencing data, discover how these organisms actually transform and make molecules. And we hope to leverage that knowledge for therapeutic purposes. So I think in terms of what we're really excited about in terms of future directions, we spent a lot of time early on focusing on chemistry that is associated with disease. Mm-hmm. And very recently, we've started to also turn our attention to chemistry that could be beneficial. So one very recent example is that we've discovered some genes and enzymes from human gut bacteria that actually allow these organisms to consume cholesterol. And we actually found that there's an association between having these genes in your gut microbiome and having lower total cholesterol levels. So this is potentially a beneficial function that we'd like to understand in more detail. But another really unexpected thing about those genes is that they're actually found in gut bacteria that have never been grown in a lab. This has now opened our eyes to the fact that about 70% of the diversity in the gut microbiome has not yet been cultivated and studied. So now we're really excited about those organisms as a new frontier to study and investigate.
Emily, is there any chance that some of the microbes in our guts are actually contending with us in a negative way? I mean, am I having a battle with my gut right now?
So there is a possibility that chemistry of the gut microbiome can be detrimental. In some other work we've done in my lab, we've shown that under certain situations, the gut microbiome can actually compete with the host for critical nutrients like choline, and there's actually work showing links between changes in the gut microbiome and childhood undernutrition. So I think that there definitely can be potential benefits, but also potential harmful activities associated with these organisms.
Lordy, I always thought my body was my friend. Now you're telling me maybe not. I have some more questions, and these are just generally for any one of you who wants to react. So let me start out by the classic question that you've probably been asked a million times, because I know I get asked the same one. What's your best piece of advice that you would give to someone starting out who wants to pursue a career in science? Any one of you wants to jump in, just go right ahead.
Well, I think Maya will have a lot to say about this, but my experience has been mentors and being able to find someone to guide you at an early age is really important, especially for students who maybe don't have immediate examples at home of what it means to go into academia, to go into science at all. Having organizations like the ones that Maya has been leading are really essential. I know participating in science fairs at a young age was really exciting for me, but also later, as a graduate student, even still, being able to participate as a mentor has really been fulfilling for me in helping the next generation to make that step. So any way that we can support mentorship, I think, is really important.
It's probably, John, the role model notion is also very important here. By implication, if you don't see anybody that looks like you, and as a scientist, you may not be persuaded that that's an area you should go into.
Absolutely.
So seem to go right together. Who else would like to respond to that one?
Yeah, this is Richard. Yeah. In computer science and engineering, we're fortunate to have, some other organizations, not my organization, like the Tapia Conference of Celebration of Diversity. In fact, Vint, you gave a talk there several years ago at that conference. And there, as we say, for example, disability is spread out around the nation, and you might not have somebody near you with a disability or a role model near you, but you will find somebody at the conference. And the role models at the conference, or I wouldn't even call them mentors, they're more role models because they're not really mentoring. Some of them might become mentoring, though, become mentors, that you begin to see people like yourself. It could be a Black, it could be Hispanic, Latinx, disabled, and then start a conversation. And I remember one time I went to Tapia, and this young student came up to me and asked me, well, should I get into computer architecture? And I realized that David Patterson was at the next table, who's famous Turing Award winner. And so I just sent him over to David Patterson. So it's just having, a big meeting like that where people can get together and meet mentors, I think is a very important thing to do. So everybody should encourage their students to go to these types of events. And I think they occur in other fields in chemistry and biology and so on.
I hope we can figure out how to emulate exactly that in this online environment while we're waiting to make it safe for us to do what you were just describing. Maya, would you like to respond to this question too?
I would. I would also say the importance of young people being around each other and doing science together in a collaborative and interdisciplinary nature. At our science competitions, the one thing we see is almost a kumbaya, Lord, my moment, right? Of young people who have found their people, who are able to talk science and engineering and able to do collaboration at a very young age, whether that's just sparking out ideas. And we need to do more of that for young people. I would also just add to what John said, that mentorship is absolutely critical, but mentors who also are able, I think we hear from young people about failure a lot. You know, what if I fail? And one of the things we, in science is failure actually in your experiments is a good thing because you learn a lot. Don't be afraid of it, right? And so when we're out there, we really, there are several values that we need to impart about science that are not intimidating, but actually build a really strong global community. And when we look at our 75,000 plus alumni, many majority of them have gone on to become scientists and engineers.
It's funny, Maya. I remember sitting next to Neil Lane, who's a former head of NSF and also former science advisor, testifying in front of the Senate Science Committee. And at some point, I said that, we don't normally publish our failures. We only publish our successes. And Neil said, maybe we should publish our failures for the reasons that you were just describing. Well, Emily and Roderick, Emily, would you like to respond to this question?
Sure. I think, I'll just add that I would encourage students who are interested in science to really embrace their unique perspectives and viewpoints. And this maybe also adds the importance of having a diverse group of people participate in science. Really, the unique viewpoint based on your experiences, background, and perspectives will allow you to make really exciting, unique discoveries. So we need you.
Roderick, would you like to add to this so far well-developed response?
Yes, I would, and I actually have several comments. So the first thing I would say is do it. Keep an open mind and seek a converged understanding. But I also agree with Maya and John on the points that they made, the importance of team learning. We really appreciate now how much more successful it is when you learn in a group, when you learn from your colleagues, from your peers. The positive impact that this has is difficult to measure, but we've seen it time and time again when an individual in the classroom with you is a learning resource and not a competitor, you really go further. So the idea of having groups and teams, it also contributes to belonging, which is also critical for being successful. And having a mentor is perhaps one of the single most practical things that one can do. And that cuts both ways. Students should seek out mentors, and mentors need to seek out students. We certainly need to cultivate a community of mentor and mentorship. If you look at persistence in the STEM fields, this is really driven by an early mentored experience that results in learning. And learning in turn generates a confidence and identity as a scientist. And that confidence and identity as a scientist is motivating, which in turn stimulates confidence. And it's kind of a circular thing, which leads to persistence in the STEM fields. There was one comment that Maya made about the fear of failure that I do want to comment on. Some of you may know the storied educator Benjamin E. Mays. He was the president of Morehouse College for 27 years, a mentor of Martin Luther King, and actually eulogized Martin Luther King. But he has a statement that is just burnished in my memory that talks about failure and the fear of failure. And the statement is that it must be borne in mind that the tragedy in life does not lie in not reaching your goals. The tragedy in life lies in having no goals to reach. It's not a disgrace to not achieve your dreams, but it is a disgrace to have no dreams. It's not a calamity to not reach the stars, but it is a calamity to have no stars for which to reach. It is not failure, but low aim that is sin.
You know, it's a good thing that most young people are too young to know you can't do that. So they just go out and try it. And at least we hope so, and we encourage them to do that. Well, thank you for those wonderful answers to that question. I'd like to move on to one more challenge. The National Science Board produced a Vision 2030 report. And it says in that report, the U.S. must find ways to speed the path from discovery to innovation and invention. Where do you see ways to enhance our ability to deliver research outputs for the benefit of society? Any one of you like to jump into that one?
Well, maybe I'll comment on where I see one of the challenges. And I think it's that the currency in a lot of research in academia is publications. We publish a paper based on the research, and that's essentially good enough. You can get promoted that way, get your tenure. And so I think a lot of the public never learns about a lot of the exciting research that we're doing. So I would definitely advocate for more fulsome science communication so that those who could take those ideas from the benchtop to practice are exposed to a lot of these breakthroughs at earlier stages than they currently are. Right now, it's an individual PI who might say, or researcher who says, I want to start a company, or I might license an idea, but that's a relatively slow process. I think if we can engage a greater community of people in pulling ideas from the lab to practice, then we'll see that acceleration that the report is seeking.
We need some more YouTube stars on the science and technology side, I think, to get followings. Anybody else want to jump into that one? I want to pick on Roderick for a minute because you've done this. You're the guy that went from the research side of things to producing medical equipment of great significance. So do you see any ways of improving the rate at which we can do that? You're muted right now, Roderick. Okay.
Yeah, okay, I'm back. Well, I may start to sound a little bit consistent here. Maybe consistency is good. But I think that one of the new things that we could bring into this space where we're trying to accelerate the delivery of effective practical solutions to problems is this concept of convergence. Even if convergence is done as a way you initially described, Vint, where you have multiple people, teams of people from disparate backgrounds sitting around the table, but with focused purpose, with use-inspired investigation and innovation and discovery. In an overarching sense, I think that is an approach and a goal. But in a more practical and down-to-earth manner, I would agree with John that we do need enhanced relationships between all parts of the discovery, innovation, and translation ecosystem. It frequently starts in academia, but doesn't end there. It ends in industry. And government certainly plays a big role. The partnerships between academia and the federal funding agencies has been marvelous over the years. And I don't think the public really appreciates the extent to which all of us have benefited from that. And I think that is something to be applauded, embraced, and perhaps even enhanced. We do need to bring in industry into this a bit more, and the policies and regulatory obstacles might be a place where one might look to enhance that type of relationship.
Thank you, Roderick. I'm going to turn to Emily in a minute, but Punch, there's a tire tracks diagram, which you're familiar with. It's coming out of a recent report, and it shows what happens when you start on the basic research side, and then on the other end, what benefits do we have? We should really pump the visibility of that tire tracks diagram to cement in people's mind that there really is a connection between basic research and the things that they enjoy every day. Emily, you're going to be just confronted with this problem as we learn more and more about how the microbiome works in our gut or doesn't work. And you'll have to find ways of doing the therapeutic connection. So what are your thoughts on this?
So I see an opportunity to think about education at multiple levels, undergraduate level, educating and training graduate students, really giving them opportunities to learn about industry, interact with industry. I know NSF funds internships where graduate students can spend time in companies. So thinking about really along with educating, giving our students basic science knowledge, teaching them about impacts that science has had on the real world alongside that education could sort of start catalyzing the process of our scientific trainees thinking about applications for their research early on.
Richard, you've done a lot of work on devices and techniques for making things more accessible. So you must be part of this whole translation story as well. So what notions come to your mind to improve, get rid of the friction and get things out there?
So first of all, for just the general field of computer science, this translation is happening all the time. And the delay is, could be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, but we have, 20 years ago, there was no Google, and now everybody uses it. There was no Zoom. I mean, these things were developed many, many years ago by you, Vint, and but it didn't get out really to the public until much later. So there is this time lag, but it's really hot in computer science. So I'm going to narrow down to accessible computing, accessible computer science. There it's a little different because the marketplace doesn't work that way because we have relatively small populations that need specific technologies, and it's really hard to start a business or be part of a business for that. So the one example is the screen reader that blind people use to have access to computers, so they can read the screen out loud if you like, rather than see the screen. And these developments happen at places like IBM in the 1980s, early 1980s. And eventually what happened with that was it finally got out and became part of iOS, part of Mac OS, part of Windows, part of Android. So all these products now all have built-in screen readers. And that's the kind of thing I'd like to see. Even though a small population uses screen readers, why can't these things that can be done in these sort of general purpose products? And this is something we call sometimes universal design, that you want to have a design that meets the needs of most people or almost all people, including people who are blind or deaf or have other physical disabilities. So I think that kind of trajectory I like, but it does require cooperation from big business, small business, and also the researchers.
There's an interesting statistic that was mentioned in the one of the videos about the billion people in the world that have disabilities. And so you hear about trying to help provide assistance for that. What's left out of that equation is the other 6 billion people who benefit from that because their friends who happen to have a disability are able to communicate, are able to engage, are able to participate in the society. So the impact of these kinds of accessible technologies is much greater than the number of people who specifically use it, but it's everybody they interact with too. Maya, you had your hand up, so please engage.
Well, I just wanted to say just about this translational piece. So we've had several alumni who were in academia and then went on to start major companies. Lee Hood being one of them, who was at Caltech, who went on to found Amgen. George Yankopoulos and Len Schleifer, who are alums of ours, who were at Columbia and then went on to found Regeneron. But we're seeing now with young people, almost a quarter of the kids that come to the International Science and Engineering Fair are patent and patent ready. And they are starting companies right out the gate. And that has really been fascinating to watch. And, you know, and they're serial entrepreneurs. We've seen several of them who've started companies, but then go back into graduate school because they need to keep learning about certain things that they're thinking about, and then they shift back out. So this type of constant evolving learning, I think, is a new thing that we're actually starting to see with young people that, you know, and some actually go into college for 2-3 years and leave, start their company, take a leave of absence, but then we'll come back. And I think we need to really be aware of that change that's happening with young people now, that this is not a 4-year track with PhD, which is another 8 with a postdoc. These kids are ready to come out. Another one is Feng Zhang, one of the co-founders of CRISPR, Cas9. You know, he is at Broad Institute at MIT, one of our alums, but he has gone on to found 4 companies, but also still being at MIT and Broad. So anyway, those are just some examples.
This is wonderful parallelism there. There's another thing that I think we can anticipate, at least I hope so, if Emily is successful and others are, our lifetimes may get extended as a result of our deeper understanding of how our bodies work and how we age, in which case you might live to 100. But what are the implications of that? One of them is that you won't necessarily learn enough in the first 20 or 25 years of your life to have a successful career for the next 60 or 70 years. You're going to have to keep learning. And so the cycle that you mentioned may turn out to be important for literally everyone on the planet, not just scientists and engineers, in order to retain their productivity and utility in the society. But we have...
Vent.
Sorry, yes, go ahead, Roderick.
Yeah, I'm sorry, since I'm not able to raise my hand in any way that you can see it.
Oh, you're right. Well, that's you raised your voice. It worked.
Okay, thanks. But I want to support Maya again and go even a bit further. I think we should not only recognize this new paradigm and this new culture that we are seeing with students, and indeed, students do come in now with an idea, with a view towards entrepreneurship, and with ideas often in our new combined engineering and medicine InMed initiative and medical school program that is very much at play. We actually have one student who came in after starting a company that's developing a solar-powered device for refrigeration for underserved locations. And this is so timely now as we're faced with vaccine and getting a vaccine out and a requirement for refrigeration for the various formulations that we've seen so far. But I think that the thing that we could do to enhance this is not only be aware of it, but embrace it, encourage it, and actually foster a greater education and an educational exposure where the students actually learn from successful entrepreneurs. We started that at our school initiative, where we bring in successful entrepreneurs and they talk to the students and go through the experience or the experiences that they have had, both the successful ones and the unsuccessful ones, as a way to help these students accelerate getting their products out into the marketplace, understanding what it takes from the beginning to be successful in translating a concept and an idea into something that's a practical product is a process that could be taught, learned, and the benefit from that would be what you just asking, how to get these things out more quickly.
So pretty clear that you really live and breathe your proposal, which is to break down those brain barriers so that we don't separate business from science and engineering necessarily, but they're all part of a common environment. Ellen, I'm very conscious of the fact that we have a whole bunch of National Science Board members here, and they're never shy about asking questions, and we have some time left. Is there anyone on the board that would like to jump in and ask questions of any of our awardees tonight?
So definitely invite people to ask questions. You can, again, use the raise hand feature. We can call on you. And if we do, turn your video on so we can see you.
So I'm not sure.
I see Suresh Babu. Please go ahead.
So I'd like to ask a question to all the award winners. If you had a magic wand, and if you want to increase our SNE workforce in our country, what would you do?
Well, let's see. Any one of the awardees like to respond to that?
Go ahead.
Yeah,
please.
it's a wonderful question. I'm thinking of what would be most impactful, and I suppose I'll answer from the perspective right now being on a campus where we benefit from an international group of students coming to the U.S. and participating in the education system. I think it's important that as a country, we're welcoming to those students. We treat them well when they're here. We encourage them to stay, but if they go back to their home country, we send them with blessings as well. That system, I think, will encourage our S&E workforce to continue to grow and to also build new bridges amongst our countries. The scientific enterprise doesn't have barriers in the same way that Roderick talked about our brains not having these artificial silos. Science need not have those barriers. And so I think a more welcoming and an effective immigration system is a big part of it.
That's
beautiful.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
I have a comment, John.
Yes, go ahead.
I think we really need to start at the primary and secondary levels. We really need to begin to emphasize the value of science, the STEM fields at this level, and also focus on quality education and experience and exposure. My sixth grade teacher, Mrs. Burke, was pivotal in my becoming a science. I mentioned in my video that I think I came out of the womb, but Mrs. Burke certainly nourished that. I was in this crucible of learning, and Mrs. Burke was a critical ingredient. And then I had another forward-thinking, inspiring, high aspiration-oriented teacher in the 10th grade, and that's how I got to Maya's International Science and Engineering Fair, despite having been educated in a fairly small town in the Deep South during the Jim Crow era. But those two individuals were absolutely critical. They saw this interest that I had, they nurtured it and supported it. So I think we need to pay a bit more attention to the primary and secondary educational school system, and then focus on the things that we talked about with John and Maya in the collegiate levels, so that the students who enter with an interest in STEM retain that interest. If you look at the data, particularly regarding underrepresented minorities, they declare an interest as they enter college in the same proportion as their population numbers. But the percentage of degrees that are awarded at the end of college is about half that. That is a large leak in this pipeline, is well documented, and it falls off again about half at the graduate, at the doctorate level. So we need to focus on retention of this talent, as well as inspiring this talent in the earliest stages.
And in,
Yeah, just real quickly, I think both John and Roderick are right that we have to work domestically on our own students and increase that number. And also we have to make sure that we're still open to the world, both. And I think we're actually doing, at least in computer science, 60% of our PhDs are already foreign nationals. And so I think our weakness really is more at home. And so let's start working on it like Roderick said.
yes.
I think Maya had a comment, and then after you comment, I have a question for you, Maya. So
Okay.
Okay, Maya, go ahead.
Just say very quickly, I think science is a powerful tool for diplomacy, and we need to continue that. Mentorship is absolutely critical. And then I'm just going to say capital, money. It is for me, always putting out the tin cup and always almost begging to support STEM. It can get very tiring. And so I would say, if I had a magic wand, I would say we need more capital.
Well,
We've got big problems in this world, and capital is going to be very helpful.
I can tell you that if I had a magic wand, the first thing I do is double the budget over here at NSF.
Hint, hint.
yeah. So the question I was going to ask you is, I was really struck with, as you talked about science news getting into schools, you started with 250, you've gone to 5,000. So maybe just a comment about how you were able to grow it. And then, do you have any information about the demographics of the schools? Are we getting into schools with high populations of underrepresented students?
So of the 5,000, over 60% are Title I schools. Teachers have to apply. We don't dump it into the classroom. The teachers have to apply. It's $500 per high school, 10 copies. You get to be part of a community, you get the resource guide to teach it, and you get a mentoring component. I would say the way we've gotten supported for that has been through philanthropy and through DoD. They have an interesting STEM collaborative there, and they funded military impacted high schools, but it's a very small amount of that 5,000. But mostly it's been philanthropy and corporate sponsorships. But again, it's my tin cup that I go out and saying, would you be willing to sponsor these 15 schools in this district? I mean, it's hard. I would love to have my goal is to have science news in high schools, in every high school in this country. And we're starting to see school districts now where they hear from teachers at the grassroots, what is this science news? And teacher says, oh, we're using it in our classroom. Well, we need to bring it into our whole district. And so we're now working with districts who are signing up for all their high schools. And that's, that's the scale model, right? And sustainability model. So I'll leave it at that.
Oh, I think
that really speaks to Punch, strengthening the scale and speed, right, Punch? Thank you.
Strengthening at speed and scale, yes.
So I think we have come very close to running out of time. So perhaps it's time to say goodnight. I hope we've all been inspired by this evening's slate of extraordinary people whose hard work and contributions have brought so much to so many people. So thank you to our award winners, to Ponch and Ellen, for their participation in tonight's event. If you'd like to watch the videos of our winners again, you can visit our website or return back to this YouTube channel anytime in the future. And from everyone at the National Science Foundation and the National Science Board, again, congratulations. May you all have a safe holiday and safety again in the following year. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you so much to all the winners, to Vint, wonderful job moderating, to Punch. And with that, the board is adjourned for today.
And thank you from the awardees. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you greatly.
Thank you.
Be well.